if we do not make history a part of a narrative that is a lived history and experience, what it becomes is, oh, we used to do that back in the day.
Don't hate me for what I'm about to say.
In terms of being African Canadian,
We don't talk about First Nations.
The spirit of my people has always been one where we overcome obstacles.
I had to literally learn about Black history in Canada. It just wasn't taught in school. I didn't have any sense of who I was. In fact, I had a better sense of American history because I was in a border town and we had so much on television and so much in our school system that was so American.
You know, a lot of our history is, as we know, oral, right? But I do have Donald Moore's book, so that is something I have that was published and printed. Donald Moore and his wife had the Negro Improvement Fund. They really encompassed everybody that was coming to Canada. It was Donald Moore and Harry Gary that went to the government of Canada and said, we want West Indians to come here. Now, you know, Canada being labor-oriented said, oh, they got to do some work. Maybe only the women under 35. you know, still had a lot of strings attached. But that was the foundations of our community.
My grandfather, my father's father, was part of the No. 2 Construction Battalion. When the First World War was on, a lot of Black men from Ontario and Nova Scotia and New Brunswick wanted to be part of the fight, but they were not allowed. They were told that Canada didn't want a checkerboard army, and so they were refused to be able to sign up for it. Only when things got bad and a lot of people died and they needed more bodies were they then allowed to participate. And they formed what they called the No. 2 Construction Battalion. And this is over 600 Black men who were sent to the war. They were not allowed to have guns. My grandfather was a sapper. He was a person who had to build the ditches and fix the roads and do the construction kinds of work. And they've never been recognized.
The first stories I learned about Black people were from working at the Black Historical Museum in Amherstburg and learning how Black folks made it through the terror of slavery, and many people lost their lives along the way. And there's some really interesting stories on the Underground Railroad. Like a slave who came across, escaped, was in Amherstburg, captured, brought back into slavery, escaped again, and then ended up in Owen Sound and was the town crier for 50 years, died at, I think, age 117. And that particular person, John Hall, is not a well-known Canadian hero. And I think to myself, why didn't we learn about him at school?
Here it is, we live in Toronto. William Peyton Hubbard was the first city comptroller in Toronto, first Black quote-unquote mayor. I mean, his house is on 66 Broadview Avenue. It stands as a historical monumental site, yet the average Canadian child would not know that the first mayor, Black mayor, was reigning in the 1800s. So here it is, we've got a lot of rich history. And so how do we uncover some of that rich history? How do we make sure that what is Canadian is not just written by those who have the wherewithal to write history, but those who also really move that margin of change, really shift the boundaries, really open up the discussion and really question, well, hold on one second. This is what has been the norm. How do we move to make sure that the norm includes us all?